Welcome to It's No Accident, a podcast about the challenges of personal injury and wrongful death law in Florida, one of the nation's most complex legal environments.
You'll hear compelling stories about real cases from our law firm in Tallahassee that will help you better understand your rights and protect yourself from the negligence of others.
I'm Mark Nani.
And I'm Jason Hamola.
And this is
It's No Accident. All right, one of the other things we want to talk about today is products liability cases. We were just talking before we got on about the fact that you've handled some pretty significant products liability cases in the past. I've had a few, but I think of the cases that we've handled as far as product liability is concerned, I think you've had some more of the notable cases with more of the legal issues and higher values. So there was one that we were talking about recently. I don't know how it came up, but we were talking about it again. It had to do, and I forget the car manufacturer, and we probably shouldn't say who the manufacturer is anyway, but it had to do with a seat back,
Right.
which is something people don't really think about. It was well, why don't you go ahead and talk about what happened?
Sure. Yeah. No, I mean, you know, the products liability cases come up in all different kind of contexts. It's really just generally talking about any type of defective product that hurts somebody. You know,
Right.
Any type of consumer product. But yeah, specifically, you do see it a lot still these days in the context of auto manufacturers defectively manufacturing their product and hurting people. I know, like, and this isn't the case that I had, but just generally in terms of things people probably heard in the news that are, you know, within the category of what we're talking about. Like, there was years ago, like the big Takata airbag thing, right? Where these airbags were would deploy and shoot shrapnel at people. You know, those are examples. And then
people might not remember this. Older folks will remember this, but I barely remember it. The Pintos, exploding Ford Pintos.
Yeah, we get rear-ended, and the gas tank was in the back, and so the whole thing would blow up or catch on fire, and people would die in there. So it comes up in lots of different contexts. But like you said, we had a seat back failure case, which, like you said, is not something that I think people typically is common knowledge for people. But you know, basically, it's a situation where there are certain auto manufacturers are worse than others at this, where the way they manufacture. When we're talking about the seat backs, we're talking about the back of the driver's seat or the front passenger seat. Typically, you know, it could be any seat, but those are where you usually typically see is one of the front two seats. And they manufacture the seats, you know, with the materials they use and the way they manufacture, it's just not strong enough to hold up to, not even crazy hard collisions, like pretty, standard collisions. And so, like in our case, it was, it was a truck that our client was in a truck, and it was actually on the interstate in Atlanta, but it was stop and go traffic, so they weren't going at like 70 miles per hour. I don't remember the speed, but it was fairly low speed. Truck gets rear-ended by an 18-wheeler, right? And when that happened, the driver's seat just broke, and so the driver's seat snapped and went straight back, and so my client, the dad, was driving. His seat goes straight back, and that messed up his shoulder because he's holding on to the wheel, and the whole seat, just tore everything in his shoulder. But then even worse than that, his 8-year-old was sitting in the car seat right behind him, and the seat went straight into her head and literally cracked her skull. I mean, it was like, immediate, life flight kind of situation. She had a terrible head injury. They had to do multiple brain surgeries, head surgery with, craniotomy, where they basically take off a chunk of your skull because there's so much pressure building up in there. Otherwise, pressure will kill you. So they, surgically remove a chunk of your skull and then sit there and wait for weeks until the swelling goes down, and they got to put it back, and you end up with like metal plates on your head and, pretty bad scarring. And, it was a bad situation, definitely a sad situation. And, she, today is doing a lot better, I think, than anybody expected her to be, but certainly has significant lifelong issues with that. And it's one of those things where when we get in there, none of these auto manufacturers are going to admit that we manufacture weak seat backs.
I was just going to say that. It's like I can't imagine that they were just begging you to let them admit that they had an issue with their seat, their seat back. But that was going to be my question. Like, how do you prove that there was an issue with the seat back, other than the fact that, it shouldn't break?
Right. Yeah. It gets super technical. I mean, you end up, I can't remember how many experts we ended up in within that case. And that's, usually why these cases get so expensive, because you have to hire so many experts. I mean, at a minimum, we had a crash reconstruction expert who would, do the measurements of all the vehicles and be able to reconstruct the crash and determine what the speed was. So like one of the factors is how hard was the impact? Because, at some point, if the crash is hard enough, the seat's going to break no matter what. Right. Even the best built seat's going to break no matter what. And so one of the factors is looking at like, all right, well, this wasn't that bad of a crash. Like, yeah, it was pretty significant, but it wasn't bad enough to where, you would expect all the vehicles to be completely destroyed. Right. So you have a crash reconstruction expert. We had a biomechanical expert who's someone who would talk about basically how the body's moving during the crash and how much force it would take to cause different injuries and stuff like that. We had, I think, a metallurgy expert who was an expert in metals and, was doing testing on the metals that were used in the seat. And that was part of the issues, at least with that case, and the cases, because this case was years ago, where they're using just substandard composite metals that aren't as strong as, basically just being cheap. Right. Instead of using the good, strong metals, they're using, trying to sub in these lesser products. And so, doing the testing to be able to prove that. And then there was at least a couple other experts on top of that, to be honest. I think there's we had a general just automotive expert but basically it's a matter of, not only recreating the crash and figuring out the speeds and, what we call the Delta V in the engineering world, but also inspecting that seat. I mean, we had multiple inspections where, it was me and all of our experts and the auto manufacturer and all their experts, and we're all, inspecting the seat and taking it apart and doing it. I mean, at one point, one of the experts had like a portable x-ray machine where they're taking x-rays of the seats to try to see on the inside of it without, because, doing those inspections, you want to try to get as much information you can without destroying the thing necessarily. Because once you tear it all down, you can't put it back, right? And so it gets really complicated. But, it's one of those things where they're never going to admit it, but if you know how to handle the case and you get the right experts and, get the right evidence and you put it all together, you can paint a really compelling story to where most of the time the manufacturer doesn't want it to go in front of a jury because they don't. No. Well, a lot of it is they don't want the bad press from it. Especially like in my case, it was the type of truck it was. It was like this auto manufacturer was one of their best-selling trucks. Okay. Right, and so they don't want a jury trial and that getting out in the press about scaring people away from buying their best-selling truck.
Well, so not only that, then you start getting into this situation where should we recall this? Right. And then when you start talking about a recall, I won't do that. Then we're talking about millions upon hundreds of millions of dollars that this company could potentially lose. So, they're always going to deny until you actually push them, press the envelope, get the evidence that you need. Once you've got what you need, and unfortunately, it takes a lot of experts, it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of digging. But if you push the right buttons and you get the right information, you can really hold these companies' feet to the fire.
Absolutely, and then eventually it gets to the point, like you're saying, if you get the right experts, the right evidence, and you do it the right way, and you build up your liability portion of your case correctly, it eventually gets to the point where the writing's on the wall. Mm-hmm. The auto manufacturer knows you have the evidence to prove that they were negligent here or strictly liable, depending on the different theory of that you use to sue them. And then it just becomes a question of what are the damages? Like how much? What's a fair number? A settlement number, and that, that becomes the whole separate argument, and especially when you're talking about someone who's going to need lifelong care, and that gets expensive.
That's a whole nother set of experts. That's a whole nother set. I'm always shocked I continually am shocked at what some of these experts can do in the knowledge base that they have. Not only the knowledge base that they have, but the fact that you can find an expert to do what you need. Mm-hmm. As far as like you brought up a metallurgist. Mm-hmm. We had one of those in that case, and then we had one in the case that Chris had with the pegs, the pegs that were going up the side of the tree. Oh yeah, right. And I was thinking about that. It was a tree stand, right? It was like a hunting tree stand that failed. Yeah, right? The peg actually failed. And when I was thinking about that, it brought up another point, because this became an issue in that case, was what's the most important thing in these products liability cases? And you're probably thinking it right now, do not get rid of the product. Oh yeah. Because in that case, there was an issue about, I think the guy had thrown it away at
Right.
some point. But anytime that there's a product failure, save the product.
Yeah, if there's no product,
Yeah.
you don't. I mean,
Do you have a case at
most
that
of the time
point?
there's no case.
Yeah, there's
right.
no case.
Yeah, I mean, you got to save it for sure. And that's like even going back to the seatback failure case. I mean, that was an issue that I mean, it all worked out, but it was something we had to jump on quickly because at that point, I don't think anybody, certainly the client and the people who were at the scene, weren't thinking seatback failure, and so the truck got totaled, and so he got a payment from the auto insurance company just like normal, and the auto insurance company took the vehicle, and then it goes off to the junkyard, and then as soon as I get on the case, I'm like, we got to track this thing down, what I mean, and track it down, and then we had to buy it back from the auto insurance company. Like the auto insurance company paid the client out for it, and then we found it and bought it back from them basically, and then had to pay to store it somewhere.
I actually don't remember that part of the case.
Yeah.
So where was it? Was this a situation where it was sitting in a scrapyard
Yeah.
getting ready to be crushed, and
At some point, either
you
that or
swooped in at the last minute?
yeah, and
took the
yeah,
vehicle?
either crushed or sold for parts, or whatever,
Yeah.
like one of those, like co-parts where they do those
Okay.
auctions, of the wrecked vehicles, and yeah, we got it in time. But again, just the point is right. I mean, if that hadn't happened, there wouldn't have been a case, and we wouldn't have been able to get, the money that this girl needed for her future care.
Oh yeah, and
because
I'm sure the manufacturer would have just been over the moon at that
Oh,
point.
yeah.
Oh, you don't have the product, you don't
Yeah.
have the seat. All right, well,
you're
good
done.
luck.
Exactly,
Yeah.
because and of course, in that case, the truck driver was at fault too. I mean, obviously the 18-wheeler rear-ended him, and they paid money, but it just wasn't. They didn't have enough insurance to even come close to covering. I mean, I don't remember off the top of my head, but like her initial medical bills from the life flight and the initial ER and hospital stay was over $1 million. You know what I mean? It was crazy. So, and that's a lot of times I guess product liability cases generally when it comes to auto manufacturers. I mean, I feel like that's something we always look out for. I'm sure other attorneys do as well. Is if you have really catastrophic injuries in a car wreck, a lot of times the people who are involved in the car wreck, especially if it's just individual people, aren't going to have enough insurance to cover it. So anytime I have a case where someone's died or is paralyzed or has severe brain damage, and there's only $10,000 or $20,000 worth of auto insurance coverage, we're always thinking, all right, well, is there some type of product liability situation here, to be able to open up the door to make additional recovery for the people.
Right. Yeah. I mean, in that case, I mean, it was a 18-wheeler, so there was significant insurance, but certainly not enough to cover her injuries. But I mean, there's situations that we've seen where, there's catastrophic injuries. You get the insurance coverage for the person that caused the collision. You got a $10,000 policy or a $25,000 policy, or even worse yet, they don't have bodily injury coverage on their policy.
Because you're not required to have it in Florida.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And that continues to be an issue, that we deal with weekly, it seems like.
Yeah.
But
I guess one of the other big things, and I haven't had a case specifically like this, but just that's kind of been in the news a lot lately, or in the legal world news, I guess a lot lately, is products liability cases stemming from people buying basically cheaply made products off Amazon that a lot of times are made by Chinese manufacturers, right?
there's a lot of them.
Right.
There's a lot, yeah.
And then you buy some cheaply made product off Amazon that's manufactured by some company in China, and then you get injured, and it's not impossible to and I'm talking about a company that's in China, a Chinese manufacturing company, and they don't have any offices in the United States. They really have no connection at all to the United States, right? In that scenario, it's not impossible to sue the company in China, but it's really freaking hard. I mean, it's like good luck trying to sue this company in China and get them, even if you somehow are able to get something that says they owe you money, then even get them to pay you, right? And so in that situation, the big battle has been attorneys basically trying to sue Amazon and hold Amazon liable as a distributor of the product, which in normal products liability law, you can do. I mean, if you're a company that's distributing a product and it's an unsafe product or a defective product, you can be held liable for that. The company can, the distributor. But then the whole battle has been, is Amazon a distributor or not, right? And this has been going on over the last, I don't know how many years, but certainly it's been picking up over the last 3 to 5 years where, and it's all state by state. Every state has their own different laws, right? And there's, court cases in some states where the courts found that Amazon is a distributor and they can be held liable. And there's cases in other states where it went the other way, and the court decided they're not a distributor, they can't be held liable, and basically, agreed with Amazon's, because Amazon's argument is basically, we're just kind of the middleman. We're not actually distributing products, we're just creating a marketplace to connect buyers and sellers, right? And so we shouldn't be held responsible for any of this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like it used to be where you go into a brick and mortar store and you buy a product. I mean, within the last 20 years or so, it's just everything is completely changed. And, I mean, ask my wife. I mean, we have a Amazon box on our doorstep, if not every day, every other day. But it's just completely different. You're just not going into the store to buy things anymore. But when you think about it, Amazon is that store. There's just not brick and mortar. But their argument is, well, we're not really a store. We're more of the actual market. We create the ability for them to put their store in our marketplace. So we're not actually the store.
Exactly. They're trying to say, like, we're not make any representations about the quality of this product. We're just connecting the buyer and the seller, kind of thing. Right.
People log on to our website and they're able to go to that person's store. We're just the website, the market. So, what do you have? How does that work? I mean, how do you prove that Amazon? I mean, without getting into the weeds too much, how do you prove that Amazon is not the market and is more of the distributor?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different theories and a lot of different arguments that can be made, but I mean, I think really just the big picture is kind of like going back to what you were saying, is just because it's not a brick and mortar store, it's still functioning, and it's all online, it's still functioning the same way as if it was a brick and mortar store. They are still distributing these products to people in the United States. I mean, big picture, I mean, the arguments are way more in the weeds than that, but that's kind of the big picture. And again, like I said, it's just some states, the products liability laws are different in every state. And so some states, like in Florida, that argument, I think, has worked in at least a couple. So there's been at least a couple cases, but I know there's other states where it hasn't worked. And so it's kind of hit or miss in terms of, which is kind of crazy to think about. It's like, if you buy a product off Amazon, like when we're describing, that's some cheap Chinese product, and you get hurt, whether or not you're going to be able to get any made whole from that or get any compensation for your injuries kind of depends on what state you're in. You know what I mean?
And that's wild.
And they're trying to, the trend I think lately has been more towards more states holding Amazon liable and saying that they can be held liable as a distributor. And then there's been some effort to make it more standardized federally in terms of there's the I think it was just this week or last week, there's the Consumer Product Safety Commission, which is a federal agency. They released an opinion, a position paper. I can't remember exactly what the.
It's not a legal opinion. It's just a like an advisory opinion.
Kind of basically saying that as far as they're concerned, Amazon's a distributor and they should be held as such. And so hopefully that'll help keep pushing it in the direction where you get more uniformity amongst the states of this just being just being how it is everywhere in terms of being able to hold the manufacturer responsible. But the Amazon responsible as a distributor. But until that you get to that point, it's kind of like you should always be careful what you're buying, I guess, on the internet. But even more so if you're about to buy a chainsaw that's made in China or something really dangerous like that, maybe think twice.
Just because it's half of what the other one costs from a reputable dealer doesn't mean that it's going to work in the same way or have the same durability
exactly.
As what one from a reputable dealer would. And what it really comes down to is control, doesn't it? I mean, the Amazon, I'm assuming, I don't think I've ever sold anything on Amazon, but I'm assuming that when you go on Amazon, they have to approve the products that you're putting on their website. I don't think you can just go on there and sell whatever you want.
Right.
So if you're a store, so to speak, and you set up a store on Amazon, I would imagine that Amazon's going to want to know what you're selling through this store. I don't think you can go on Amazon and sell illicit drugs.
Right.
I don't think you can go on Amazon and sell assault rifles. They know what's being sold. And then not only that, last time I checked, when you buy something on Amazon and it gets delivered to your house, it's coming in one of those little Amazon vans, and it's coming in an Amazon box or one of those Amazon bags.
Right.
So they're distributing it out to the individuals, customers that are buying it as well. And for them to sit back and say, oh, we don't have any control over this.
Right.
This is just a marketplace,
Right.
and we don't have anything to do with the products that are being sold on our marketplace. It's disingenuous.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, it's like you look at it, they're doing all the stuff a normal distributor would do, but then they're like, oh, but we're not a distributor.
Right.
Right. So, and it is different too. I mean, it can really get in the weeds, but it's different between, what we're talking about in terms of a company selling their products through Amazon versus, you'll buy the Amazon, I can't remember what they call it, but some of the products you buy on there are like Amazon brand products, right? And so those are easier, right?
Right.
Like if you buy one of those Amazon brand products, something happens, that's definitely a lot easier. But it's still, and I guess really part of it is just the law catching up to technology and the way society is now. You know what I mean?
We both know it takes forever.
The law's slow.
Yeah,
right?
the law is very slow to catch up with the way things actually operate out in the real world.
Absolutely.
And we're going to continue to see it too. I mean, with the self-driving delivery cars that are probably going to be coming to market within the next decade, drones that are delivering things to people's houses that we'll probably see within the next couple of decades, maybe sooner, who knows.
Sure.
These are all things that the law is going to probably have a hard time catching up with, but at some point, hopefully it will.
Right, absolutely.
No matter your injury, Nani Hamola is here to help you recover. Visit noho.law today.